Coming to you with a power steering update on the 1987 Cub Cadet 1811. As you probably saw in one of the previous videos, I got the Kohler Magnum 20 to run, at least off of carb spray and a little bit of gasoline, so that's what matters. And now I'm moving forward with the steering. And I got the steering column in from a Simplicity Sunstar, and I got it to the point where the column sticks up out of the dash the same amount that it did with the manual steering gearbox, or manual steering column I should say. I took the brackets off. This one was one piece, but I cut it apart to make some brackets. But I took the mounts off the steering box because it is supported by that clamp that's up here, so this whole steering box doesn't go anywhere. I shake the whole tractor, and it kind of rests on this rod that goes back and forth for the hydro lever, but obviously the lever still moves like it should. And the hydraulic spool valve does make a little bit of contact with this bar, but I'm either just going to bend this part of the bar out a little bit or just clearance it, make a little tiny cut. But the gas tank does fit in here and it does clear to the lines. And I have this bracket here that uses this top stud sticking out, and that's going to use the top bolt hole from this hydraulic spool valve to hold it in place. Hose clamp is just for mock-up purposes. But it was a direct fit, and I did not have to do any modifications to the steering column. And there's plenty of room. Of course, the drive shaft isn't hooked up because I don't have the coupler, but that's roughly where the drive shaft sits. And as you can see, there's a good about 4 or 5 inches or so of space between the bottom of the ports and the drive shaft. So there will be plenty of clearance. And now all I've got to do is get the Cyclops front axle and the steering ram and brackets and some of the hoses and get that hooked up. These hoses here are the ones off the Simplicity Sunstar, and they are long enough to reach from the steering box down through the frame and out to the side where the steering cylinder would be. So I'm probably going to be able to use those lines for the steering cylinder. And I'm not sure how exactly I'm going to plumb this system up yet, but what I'm thinking about doing is disconnecting, it's hard for you guys to see this, disconnecting the input into the spool valve, bending the line out just a tad, and getting a custom hydraulic line that's got the male fitting that will screw in to this line here, and then go to the input of the steering box, and the output of the steering box will go to the input of the spool valve. So I'll have both of them hooked up in series, and the auxiliary port on this steering box I'll just cap off if I can find a cap for it. I think that's going to be the easiest way to plumb up the hydraulics on this thing. Otherwise I have to tee into the return line, and I would then have to modify this other line here, the output line that goes back to the trans. So if I go into the steering box, out of the box to the spool valve, and out of the spool valve to the trans, I won't have to mess with this line at all. This one will stay just the way it is, and the input hose will just be, or line will be bent out just a tad, so that way I'll have enough room to connect a line to it. So it's kind of confusing to explain without showing you guys, but that's the tentative plan as of now. Next week I'm going back to working at the motor repair shop in town for the summer, and so I'll get the rest of the power steering parts from there. And once I get those parts, we'll continue on with this project, but for now it's on hold. So with that being said, enough of this, and I'll get back to you guys on some of these other projects I've got going on, like this owning mess I've got going on for this case. But yep, enough said. I'll talk to you guys later.